Now, you probably don't know who Ignatius Sancho is, but you should. Here are 5 things I think everyone should know about Ignatius Sancho, a Black British writer, composer, shopkeeper, and abolitionist. Number 1, learning how to read was Sancho's pathway to freedom. So like Frederick Douglass, who was born about 100 years after Sancho, learning how to read was Sancho's first window into the world beyond slavery. After the Duke of Montague, a friend of the owners of Sancho, saw the intellect that the young man had, he decided to teach him how to read. Now, once Sancho learned how to read, he noticed how horrible slavery was. Before that, no one had told him that. So he read about and learned about the evils of slavery, and so he escaped to the widow of the man who taught him how to read, the Duke of Montague. Number 2, Sancho owned a Black-owned business, a grocery shop, when most Black people in the British Empire were considered property themselves. So after the death of the Duchess of Montague, Sancho went on to work for her son-in-law, George Montague, who would become the Duke of Montague. He worked for him as a valet for over 20 years. Now, at a certain point when he started to have ill health, specifically he started to get gout, he actually got money to go ahead and buy a grocery, actually with the help of George Montague. Now, this grocery sold tea, it sold sugar, it sold tobacco, which, of course, at that time came directly based on slave labor. Number 3, Sancho was one of the few Black people from the 18th century that we have an accurate image of. So before photography, the best way to get your image kind of encapsulated was either through sculpture or through a portrait that was painted by a painter. Now, typically, if you wanted to have your portrait painted, you had to pay for it. So people with means, so money, were able to afford it. So, of course, at that time, we had so many people, Black people in slavery, many Black people couldn't afford to get their portraits painted. Now, among the Black people who could actually get their portraits painted was Chevalier, who I reviewed the film about his life, so you can see that in the card above, as well as, we believe, Laura Equiano, though at least one portrait of Equiano, some believe, is actually a portrait of Ignatius Sancho. In 1768, the artist Thomas Gainsborough went to paint the portrait of the then Duchess of Montague, so George Montague's wife. So again, she became the Duchess of Montague. And so he went to paint her. And so while the painter was there, he actually also painted the portrait of Ignatius Sancho. Number 4, Ignatius Sancho is known to be the first person of African descent to vote in a British election. Being the owner of a grocery shop, Ignatius Sancho was a property owner. And so at the time, if you wanted to vote, you had to be a property owner. He was legally eligible to vote. So he voted at least twice, once in 1774 and again in 1780, right before his death. And of course, what's so remarkable about this, not only the fact that he, a Black man was able to vote, so many white men at the time, because they didn't own property, pretty much the majority, couldn't vote. So here you have a Black man who can vote at a time where most white men can't. I'm sure nobody had a problem with that at all. we know people aren't going to get mad because this Black guy could vote where all these white guys can't. I'm sure no one had any issues at that time. Number 5, we don't have to rely on what other people thought that Ignatius Sancho might have thought or felt in his life. We can hear directly from the man himself. The letters of Ignatius Sancho were published in 1782, so 2 years after his death. In the same year, a biography of Ignatius Sancho was published that was written by Joseph Jekyll, a Welsh solicitor and politician. And so again, we have a lot, we know a lot about his life from both his own letters as well as from what Joseph Jekyll wrote. So in Sancho's letters, he wrote about the struggles of being a Black person in Britain. So both loving his home country, but also feeling like an outsider. He wrote to his friend, British novelist Lawrence Sterne, and implored him to put his Sterne's talents behind the cause of abolition. He also mentioned the evils of slavery and the need to abolish slavery in many of his letters as well. Now, one interesting thing you can read in his letters, which you actually can buy on Amazon, I'll put a link in the description box below so you can kind of see how to, again, get a copy of this. Also, you might find in your local library. So interesting thing you can read about in his letters is his reaction to the American Revolution. And so again, here you have this black person who is enslaved in Great Britain, but again, he also has a love for the country. And so like many like many British citizens, he was against the rebellion in the colonies. Now, if you found that video interesting and or informative, please like this video, subscribe to my channel. Also, please share this video. If you have any specific questions about Ignatius Sancho, please leave those questions in the comment section below. Thank you all for your time and have a wonderful rest of your day.